Hi, I'm Steve Acuna, your host of the 30-Minute Sage, your source of practical advice to move forward through corporate and life changes. I come to you as a certified professional in change management and life coaching with over 25 years of boots on the ground and leadership experience that spans 5 corporate industries. This podcast explores the challenges of leading corporate teams through change with the audacious goal to apply techniques and wisdoms that go well beyond the workplace and into daily life. Along the way, I will share my successes and failures, my learnings and my truths as I continue to transcend corporate life and apply my personal mission to raise consciousness that activates the power of our human community. Welcome to the 30-Minute Sage. Now let's get started. Welcome to Episode 1, My Awakening, Hardship is My Teacher, and Life Mission. Hey, before we get into the content, let's talk about the podcast itself. First off, the podcast is casual and will sound more like a conversation. This cuts down to heavy production and helps me focus on sharing and content. In addition, this isn't going to be a lecture-type series. I will share my life stories that are based on practical application and lessons learned, and then you can determine what makes sense for your situation. I call it finding your inner sage. Also, I will share a takeaway for each segment so you have something you can reflect on afterwards. Please don't forget to send comments and hit the like button to help promote the podcast. Finally, this podcast is not therapy. Change management can be emotionally charged. So if you're not emotionally okay, please seek the professional assistance you need. Professional therapy has helped me and my family through tough times. So remember, it's okay to not be okay. You know, when I was younger and starting out in business, it was really about just getting the work done. It was about moving quick. It was about actually moving quicker than other people that I was competing with, doing more, doing it faster, doing it better, higher quality, all of that. It was all just about proving myself, you know. And a lot of the work that I did was I thought was really good work. You know, I thought it was for what I knew and how I was developing. I thought it was good. I'm proud of it. I could look back and say, hey, yeah, I got some good stories from that and some good lessons, and it helped me to develop. But it was really self-motivated for just kind of getting myself in my career and starting. And that was really a lot of it. You know, I newly married and feeling as though a lot of pressure was on me as an individual to help us succeed in our careers and with my wife. And it was a challenging time. I wanted to break away. I didn't want to have to rely on family for anything, those types of things. So it was really pretty myopic. I mean, I was just really focused on getting stuff done and just banging out the work. And, you know, things that actually were challenging, like resistance management, like when things like I was expecting a project to be released, and this was the way it was expected that folks would behave and do things. All of that didn't happen that way, and it was very frustrating. And many times it was more, you know, trying to just get it through the system, get the improvements done, get the project deployed. Focus on pushing things out and being done with it to move on to the next. And that was a lot of my earlier years. And I was kind of brought up in that space. So change management, slow, you know, completely slow. I don't want to take the time to think about, you know, the people that are impacted by change. I mean, that's their job, right? I mean, that was the kind of mentality I had in those earlier days because I was really focused on making sure that I was top notch in my performance and wanted to get that bonus, you know, wanted to get that promotion, whatever it was I was shooting for. It was always a target, right? And so what I started to realize, though, is that, you know, over time that the output of the work wasn't really effective. It was compounding a lot of additional work because projects would get done and released and they would have problems and people would be resisting those changes to processes or expectations or even policy sometimes, you know, because they weren't ready for it. And as a result of that, you know, we had kind of this remedial work that was constantly happening with these projects. And we never quite got done fixing things because they were always in that state. And so it started to dawn on me that I had to really think about the people side of things and start to understand a little bit more about the behavior of how people operate. And, the sad thing about it is, my very first job, I worked for an industrial psychologist, and we talked about the people side of things. We talked about the behavior side of things. But when I got into the corporate world, that was in consulting, but when I got into the corporate world, and it was really about like, what did you get done? My I guess my compass, my internal compass of those important concepts just kind of got, thrown off. And it was really about me just trying to make sure that I can be successful and succeed and start out on the right foot in my career and, financially. And, we had moved away from my family, from our family homes, our locations. So we were on our own. And so there was a lot of that going on. But again, coming back to the story, it was kind of this diminishing return. And I started to recognize that I had to reset and think a lot more about what is it that's preventing things from actually being successful, and this is where like some of the earlier days of change management for me started happening, because I started recognizing that, hey, involving people in things, involving those that are affected by change in what the change is, and maybe even helping them, facilitate sessions to help them identify solutions for their own areas so that they're invested. I started applying those kinds of concepts and principles. Nobody was telling me to do that. I just felt like I needed to do that because I felt like these projects were just not going as well as they could have, even though I felt a really good job managing things. I just wasn't really seeing the personal pride and recognizing that people were happy about the work that I was doing and what I was putting out there for people to use. And so change management started to become much more of an essential measure for success for me. But it really wasn't methodical in those days. It was just really kind of intentional, but not really a method. So I started really kind of getting more into what that means for the method side of things. And I progressed through my career, and I moved up in my career and started getting into managing and supporting a large global technology company, and kind of fast tracking to my career, of course, in this story. But what was essential about it was that we started to realize that there was something more to this work that had to be applied in order to get better performance. And that's when the concept of change management really kind of started to grow in the corporate environment. And I took to it. I really felt it was important, and I felt that it was a critical component to really taking us to another level of evolution. And it really kind of started to dawn on me how important that was when I started to have additional situations happen in my life. And so just kind of getting into a little bit of the more personal side of things, it was one of those times in my life where I never suspected that I would be dealing with a situation that was about my son. And this was years ago now. But he was in a situation where his health was disrupted. And it made me kind of shift my thinking about change management to think of it not so much that it was just about what I do in my job and work, but what is it about change that I needed to learn for myself in order to be better at it. And that self-reflection was something that really struck me. It made me realize that change is essential in my entire life and will always be a part of my entire life. And so this particular component was something that started a journey for me that created so many different and unique and special outcomes in my career and awareness and even consciousness that I started to feel as though I was onto something. And so here's my takeaway number one that I'd like you to really kind of think about as we start to progress into this journey of change management together. But everything is change. And one of the aspects of change that's critical to understand and accept is resistance. So everything is change, and resistance to change is in everything as well. So by accepting this, I started on this path of really a path that I still am on, about what it means to accept that I myself am always going to have some degree of resistance to work on, and that everything is change in my life. And by doing that, I started to have a perspective that was much more welcoming for new solutions and ideas about what it means to start this path in change management. Okay, take a deep breath here. Getting into some more personal side of things that relates to this concept of change management and how it applies to resistance. And so let's get into it. In the last segment, I talked a little bit about a personal situation with my son. My son's name is Jason, and love him to death. He's a special kid. I just can't tell you. He's so kind-hearted, and I have a lot of pride in how he is as a human being. Probably about it's 4 or 5 years ago now. My son was diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer, and it started out in a way that was really surprising for all of us. My wife was out of town, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, I have this lump on my neck," and I looked at it and I said, "Okay, let's go in and get this checked out." And when I saw his face, I have this theory, when people are really not well, they kind of know something is going on. They kind of know that something's not right. And when I looked at my son that day, when I looked at his eyes, he had that look that he just knew something was not right. And so I took him in. I, of course, called my wife, who unfortunately was out of town at the time. But so she knew what was going on. So we went in. And, he had a little bit of a cold. So I was thinking, oh, it's just the swollen lymph node or something like that. It's not a big deal. These things happen. I know when I was a kid, I used to have swollen lymph nodes, and that's just, I had a skinny neck, you can kind of see stuff like that, and my son did too. So I was like, it's probably nothing. So we went in, and of course we had an older doctor who's quite experienced, and he looked at it and examined it. And he said, he looked at me and said, "You need to get that checked out. And we need to make an appointment like tomorrow." And my heart just dropped, and I thought, that can't be what I heard. I asked him, I started going through this change curve again. Of course, we all know that is part of our work in change management is the change curve. And I started going into the steps, and I started questioning, and asking, so it's not that serious, right? And he just looked at me and said, "It's best to get it checked. I can't tell." But, I looked at him and I thought, he knows, he's seen, there's something here, and I should be worried. And I was. So I tried to stay strong in this situation. And of course, I called my wife and told her what happened. And we were both kind of panicking on the inside. And Jason, of course, was picking up on that energy as well. So I know he wasn't feeling very good on the inside at all. And so we went in and got checked, and it, I'll fast forward a little bit because we had to wait a while to get the diagnosis, but he was diagnosed with cancer, with thyroid cancer. And it floored us, absolutely floored us. I told my family, and it was a situation where everyone was stunned. We didn't even know how to act or behave, and we are we're a spiritual family, so we look to prayer and supporting each other. And oh boy, I prayed. And I think it's one of those situations where you start to understand that change isn't something you can always be prepared for. And fast forward a little bit, his thyroid was removed, and about 56 lymph nodes So the cancer had spread through the lymph nodes, and I found out that day that it was a lot worse than I thought it was, because it had in the briefing before the surgery, the doctor had told us a little bit more of the severity of and the preparation that they were taking, how they were taking care of it. And it had spread close to his windpipe and the nerves of his vocal cords, and it had actually gone down into his chest area, slightly under his sternum. And so they had 6 surgeons ready to do the equivalency of a open heart type of, spreading of his ribs to get in there if it was difficult to remove. And so this was a 10-hour surgery. I have to say that there are some true heroes in this world, and that's what I learned that day, is that there are some people in this world, those surgeons and the nurses and the staff that dedicated their attention skills, all they know, there's everything that they had to just make sure he was well, and he came through with flying colors. He has since had 2 more surgeries to remove additional lymph nodes that have shown up with cancer. And so we've gone through this journey 3 times now, and each time feels the same way as the first. And what this taught me, though, kind of bringing it back to subject, is that change like that is something that it made me angry. It made me ask the questions of why, why us? Why Jason? Why is our family affected by cancer? And most importantly, why my son, and he's such a kind-hearted child, and just a joy, and I had a lot of anger. I went through the whole curve, and every surgery I've gone through that whole, and curve, I mean by change curve, which starts with anger and ends with acceptance, and you can fill in the middle portions of that. And there's a lot of documented, information about that. So if you want to go off and take a look at the change curve, I highly recommend it, because you'll see yourself in it, I'm sure, if you look back on changes that have affected your life. But I was in a situation where I was trying to manage my job, and I was trying to manage this situation with my family, and trying to be so strong for my son. And I was just kind of crumbling. So I got into a breaking point in my career where my job was really so extreme. I was working for another key technology company. And it was really the last technology company I worked for, before I joined where I'm at now in the healthcare industry. And but the high pressure, high stress, and I had to break away from that, because I was kind of in a situation where I had to put priority to my family. My son was going through some things that needed me. And so I had to reflect back on what it meant to get into this work and do this type of work. And I reflected through my entire career to just say, what do I do now? What do I do now? What is it what's the common denominator here that can get me back on track and get my life at least stable, so that I could support my wife and my son and everybody. And I threaded through I went through all of my jobs, and I thought, the one theme that I've always learned about, or was reminded of and enjoyed, was managing and helping people, managing change and helping people succeed through really hard stuff. And I recognized that that's what I needed to do. I needed to start over. I needed to find a way to cultivate that into my career, my direction, And so I started to accept these things, as my truths. And I started to think about this situation with my son in a different way. I started thinking about all of the things that I learned from this ordeal, all the things that I reflected on that I never would have because of this ordeal. And I started to think about all of the folks that deal with this all the time, and yet they can manage through. However they can, they try, they manage through. And this was me. I had gone through that myself. And so this acceptance of that was something that was critically important for me. And it was also something that I have to say was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life to get through it, I got real comfortable with crying. I got real comfortable with, giving my wife and my son hugs and telling them that I love them and that I care for them. I got real comfortable with all the things that I maybe took for granted in the past. So what this did is it changed me. It rewired me for this work. It made me start to think about, what does it mean to be a good human in this work? What does it mean to actually make a difference in someone's life? What if I was dealing with a difficult change and working through helping people, and somebody that was affected by change was going through what I just went through at the same time? How could I just make it a little bit better? How can I find ways to just be supportive? And so this brings me to takeaway number 2, which was a hard one for me to learn. And as you can tell, it's still a hard one for me to process sometimes. But hardship can be one of your most powerful teachers. I'll say this in addition, though. Hardship can be one of your most powerful teachers when you're ready to accept it. If you're in a state of anger because of the change or some type of denial, you just may not be ready to go to realizing the benefits of hardship. So I suggest this, and this is something I learned through this process, is people going through, or when I was going through it, I didn't want people to tell me that, hardship is a good teacher. Like if they would have said that to me when I was angry, that would have just been a bad situation, gone even worse, it would have gotten even worse. So just be mindful of where people are in the change curve when you are trying to offer information or suggestions or just help, support, or guidance or advice, whatever you want to call it. But I wasn't ready for that kind of stuff. It took me a while to get there, but now I am ready. And each time I face hardship, I recognize the value of that hardship as just it's a difficult time, but it's a powerful teacher. So hardship can be one of your most powerful teachers. Just consider that. All right, let's talk about personal life mission and how I built that into this work for myself. I have a big mission that I've defined for myself that encompasses all this work and beyond. My personal life mission is to raise consciousness that activates the power of our human community. You could probably already tell that this is going to be a unique story behind this one, and certainly it is. I'll discuss that through this segment. But I'll start by saying this. Initially, in my younger years, my personal life mission, as I discussed in previous segment, was about achieving professional goals and maybe contributing to family, wealth, and prosperity, and sometimes around being the best at my work. Thinking about it now, just after all of this discussion and probably through this storytelling, you can probably get the sense that I kind of feel that for myself is stale and now kind of unsatisfying. And it is unsatisfying to think about those words. But I do want to pause for a moment, because I think some of you right now might be thinking, well, those are reasonable, statements to make, and goals and a mission rather. So let me be intentional about how I share this story. those older statements made perfect sense for me for that version of Steve many years ago, which illustrated for me that it's relative sometimes. And it's okay to change the personal life mission or personal mission to fit you as you grow in awareness and consciousness. And so, all right, so I said the word consciousness, and what do I mean by that? I should probably step back for a minute and just talk about what I mean by that. Online consciousness is defined in three ways. It's a state or a condition of being conscious. Okay, great. Another definition is a sense of one's personal or collective identity, including the attitudes, beliefs, and sensitivities held by or considered characteristic of an individual or group. Okay. The third definition is a special awareness or sensitivity. So let's go back to my mission, just so I can be clear about what this means specifically for the mission that I'm talking about. So the mission is to raise consciousness to activate the power of our human community. For me, my mission is really about evolving my identity, accepting the beliefs and sensitivities of myself, to do the intentional acts that support all people, not just those that I work with. So you see the difference in perspective from the earlier version of Steve versus what I've evolved into, much of which has to do with the previous segment when I talked about my learning from hardship and expanding my thinking to being a good human. What does that mean to be a good human? This new personal mission just feels right. And all the transparency in the podcast and this podcast and the desire for me to help others see their own path through my sharing is the whole point of this work. And by making this about humanity, it goes from my professional work to world work, which I believe is needed more now than ever. What's the funny thing about it is, developing this mission was this, I had this notion of maybe I need to go into a cave and meditate and find my true self and sort of check out from the mainstream, And, I do meditate twice a day, and I've been doing that for decades. But for me, not exiting life to do this mission, I don't think that that's really what it's about. It's actually the opposite of exiting life to do this mission. It's like, that's not the point. It's about applying myself to life and the people that I work with, my family, those that I meet, those that I have any contact with, so that my mission becomes the calling. And what I mean by the calling is it's a drumbeat in my life that truly matches the rhythm of my heartbeat, So I started to see that my current work, my current actions, like starting this podcast, for instance, became the means to the end. So here's the final takeaway, number 3. In creating a life mission, start from the end. What I did is I accepted my uniqueness, my nature, the behavior across my entire life to identify who this Steve guy was, who he was, who he is, and who he will be. And then I did a little imagination, picturing myself all old and kind of crusty, telling this story to this younger person about what I did in life that I was most proud of. And this mission is what I said in that imagination, that imaginary situation, meaning that, this is what would make me the most proud to say that I've accomplished. And so this became much more real for me about my entire life and not just a period of time in my life. And so the takeaway here of creating a life mission, and starting from the end is really something that all of you can do, that all of us can do. And as a result of doing this exercise, you find your own uniqueness. You start to empower what you are as this human being that is in this world, contributing in your own way, in your special way, that is different from everyone else. That piece is what I want to ensure that I leave you with in this segment, because all of that uniqueness is what enriches this world. It becomes world work when you think of things at that level. And it also becomes something that seems as though you are always going to evolve yourself and grow no matter what you're doing. And it becomes all-encompassing with the plans that you have, with the things that you're doing today, with what you want to do in your whole life. And so I really feel like this is something that I kind of discovered, through this exercise. And the last segment about hardship was really one that kind of opened my eyes about the importance of this for myself. So I'm hoping that this resonates with you. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen in. All right, I just wanted to record a summary here of the takeaways so that you have this at the end of the podcast. But before I get into that, I just want to also thank you for tuning in and listening. I'd love to have some comments back and some support on that side of it so that I get better every single time. I also want to just kind of cover off the hardships segment as well and tell you that my son's doing great. I know that I talked about some of the darker days and the things that we dealt with. But he's doing fantastic. And in fact, through this whole process, I recognize how strong he is. And that is very inspiring for me, my family, seeing how he's gotten through all of this and has done so well. And so I just want to mention that to everyone so that you're not left hanging with where he's at today. So we're all in good spirits and very happy with his progress. For the first takeaway, everything is change. And resistance to change is in everything. That was a takeaway that we talked about with the My Awakening segment. And in my opinion, by accepting this statement, when I accepted this statement, it helped me to be more relaxed in dealing with my own resistance, helped me to pace myself, to be more supportive, and most importantly, more kind to myself as I work through change, which is constant and all the time through life. From the second takeaway, that was from Hardship is My Teacher, the second segment. Hardship can be your most powerful teacher when you're ready to accept it. So what I mean by that is just be mindful of where you are or others are in the process of accepting change. Some may not be ready to think of hardship as a teacher until they are further along in processing it. And I think that's just a good thing to remember. I learned that lesson. I lived that lesson. The third segment was life mission. And life mission, we talked about in creating a life mission, start from the end. Envision and build in what makes you unique through your life. Consider those things that would be really the ultimate outcomes of your life. And statements like this should be something that when you share them, you just have so much pride, and you think about the things that would be so encompassing of a great life that you've led. And this is something that I've tried to do, and I work on. And obviously, with my mission statement that you hear in the opener, these are big, bold statements that really stretch me. And I see this podcast as my opportunity to really help continue to drive towards that mission through my voice and sharing my experiences, the truths that I've found through my life. And what I'm hopeful of is that you continue to tune in and hear some different stories about various subjects around change management and applying that in the corporate life as well as just everyday life. And I look forward to the next time that you are with me listening to this podcast. And I appreciate everything that you do. Please feel free to provide me some comments, suggestions, and I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, thank you so much.